Okay, so I am going to cover just a few more basic things about animation this week. For your final project, I am going to ask you to make something that is time-based, meaning there has to be some type of motion. All right, so I'm going to give you some basic options, and I will help if you have questions, but otherwise, I want you to kind of develop the idea, and you're going to have to do a little bit of research. Okay. Now, Adobe Photoshop is not the ideal program to make animation in. You can, however, make very basic, simple animations, and it's not that hard. I showed you earlier how to import a stack. In this case, we are just going to, I'm going to show you a frame animation, and I'm going to talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of that, versus in the next video, I'm going to show you how to do a video animation and the advantages and disadvantages with that. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have a new document, 8.5 by 11, 300 ppi. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to keep this very simple. So I'm going to go ahead and make an elliptical marquee. I am going to make sure I'm on layer 1, and I'm going to go ahead and fill that marquee. Okay. I'm going to pull it over here. I'm going to have it like a ball coming in, bouncing, and then going up. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is come down here and make sure I'm on Create Frame Animation. And remember, if you can't find your timeline, it's underneath the window Timeline. And I'm going to click on that button. Now in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I have one frame here. I'm going to make a second frame by clicking the Add button right down here. Okay, it's in between the Tween and the Trash button. Okay, and I'm going to show you a little bit about tweening. Tweening can get a bad name because lazy animators use it and it doesn't look very good. A lot of Flash animation in early parts of the internet was done with tweening. So you're not doing much work, and it didn't look all that great. But in this case, we're going to play with this a little bit. All right, so I want my ball here, and then I'm going to pull it down because I'm going to have it kind of like bounce off the floor here. Okay. So now in frame 1, it's here. Frame 2, it's here. Okay, so now what I want to do is in between these two buttons, right down here, right with the new one and the trash, it looks like a bunch of small balls. Okay, I'm going to click on that, and that's my tween. So I'm going to tween with my previous frame, frame 1. Okay, all layers because I want the background in. Okay, my position, opacity, and effects. Okay, you can select or deselect any of these. In this case, it's not going to hurt anything. Okay, to do this, I'm going to go ahead and put in like 12 frames. Hit OK. And you'll notice what happens. Okay, and if I push play, Photoshop now moves it from one to the other. Now here is the issue with Photoshop. Why it's not necessarily ideal, because sometimes it has some issues with in creating frame animations. If you start messing around and try and tween, it likes to follow a standard set of steps, right? So one of the things I can also tween are effects. Now I could try to put the effects here, right? So if I come in and double click on my layer, I'll bring up my layer styles, and if I put on an outer glow, let's say opacity 100%, okay, make it fairly big, hit OK. The problem now is that there's no glow until I hit here, right? So in order to tween that, I have to then come back in, delete these, okay? And it'll ask me if I want to delete the frames. Yes, I do. Or I can step back and do this, okay? And now I'm going to have to tween it again. Okay, so anytime you make a change, you either are going to have to go in and manually adjust every single frame, or you're going to have to come in and know what you are planning to do from the beginning, right, so you can do the tweening properly. So let's say I wanted this ball to bounce off of the floor and then the glow to appear, all right, but to transition in. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to go ahead and hit tween. Right, here's where effects comes into play, and hit OK. Now you notice what happens if I play this again. Right, the glow comes in. Okay. Now suppose, and here's another place where it gets a little tricky, I want the glow to fade back out as it bounces back up. Okay, well I'm going to go ahead from frame 14 here. I'm going to click a new layer. I'm going to pull it up to here. And it's not enough in this case just to turn the effects off. I'll show you what I mean. So I just clicked on the eye, turn the effects off. I'm going to go ahead and tween, hit OK. What will happen is that Photoshop will go from the effects being fully on to the effects being off. Okay. So the way that you have to do this, if you choose to do this way, is you have to double click here, and I'm going to drop my opacity. Nope, wrong thing. Make sure I'm click on outer glow, drop my opacity here. Okay. Now Photoshop can tween that effect. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead, hit tween 12, make sure my position and opacity and effects is on, and hit OK. And now what will happen, okay, is that it will turn the glow on and then back off. So just so you know, if you choose to use layer styles, okay, that is the way you're going to have to adjust it. Okay. Now let's suppose I wanted to, so if a ball bounces, for example, right, it tends to slow down at the bottom and then speed back up. Okay, so I could do that. I could come in. One of the things I could do is, for example, like well, let's get it at the bottom, right here. I could come in and I could tween between this and the previous and just add like two frames. Okay, and now you'll see what happens. See how it slows down as it comes back up, right? You can come in too, by the way, like here, for example. I could move it here. This one I could move it here. This one I could move it here. Okay, and then this one I'm going to move it a little bit here. All right, so now when I play, okay, you see how it bounces around? So once you have your frames in place, you can come in and you can individually play with them. Okay, just know that that is essentially like if you're working like a traditional animator, you would draw each frame, and then on each frame you could change things. All right, so again, the tricky thing about doing animation in Photoshop is you really have to know what you are planning to do. It doesn't do real well with like sort of off-the-cuff kind of things. Okay. Now the last thing I'll show you as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make a new frame here. I'm going to pull the ball over here, and I'm going to reduce the opacity. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead, click on my last frame. I'm going to tween. I'm going to add 12 frames from the previous frame. Hit OK. Photoshop can also change the opacity as well, okay, of your objects. So you can do that on your layers, just playing with the opacity. Okay, you can add multiple objects. The more objects you add, the more layers that you add. Like I could make 2 balls bouncing individually, or 4 or 10. Just know that you are exponentially increasing the complexity of what you do. Okay. So for your file for this week, for this first file, what I want to see you do is something similar to this. I just want you to make a ball. You can make a box, I don't care. And what I want you to do is to show it bouncing around the frame. Okay. So, and I want you to play with the position, the opacity, and go ahead and play with some layer styles as well. Okay. And feel free to be as creative as you want. It doesn't have to be a ball, it could be something else. I just want to be able to see that you can play with these tools.